I want to start off by asking you a bit about what Philip Hammond told me earlier on the show. I don't know if you managed to watch the interview, but he basically said that if we don't get a deal, then he'll have to take a different approach to Britain's economy. There'll need to be a new budget next year. Now, of course, we don't know what will be in that new budget, but it could be, as Jacob Rees-Mogg was speculating earlier, it could be, tax cuts, it could be something to do with regulation. Is it something that worries you?
I found the whole interview really shocking, to be honest. I think you did as well, looking from your expression. I thought it was absolutely
I don't want to quite say what I was thinking about
I thought it was callous complacency that came across about this week's budget, but also about the future. Look, you spoke to him about universal credit and the hardship that people have been threatened with, losing 3 million people losing £2,500 a year, going to food banks as a result of it, and he's barely mentioned it. What we're saying, and it's not just me, it's the National Audit Office, it's large numbers of charitable organisations and others, basically saying halt the rollout of universal credit to stop these people being forced into poverty. Halt the rollout. And I'm saying to other political parties that if he doesn't halt the rollout of universal credit, we've got to vote this budget down. We've got to stop him forcing people into poverty in this way. And then when you asked him about Brexit, I was really shocked. He's gone back to what he said some time ago, which is basically he seems to have accepted a no-deal Brexit, and he does want us to be like Singapore, a sort of tax haven, which will undermine our manufacturing base and I think put people's living standards at risk. I was really shocked by the interview, really shocked.
Well, to be fair to the Chancellor, he did say that he wanted to see a deal, that that's something that he was hoping for. So I put it to you that if you are so concerned by what the government may do in a no-deal scenario, would the responsible thing for Labour to be doing is to at least have on the table supporting the deal that Theresa May comes back with?
I think you misinterpreted the shift that he's undertaken in this last couple of weeks. In that interview, he seemed to complacently accept that there's a likelihood of no deal. We can't accept that. We've got to ensure that there is a deal. And the best way of doing that is Theresa May negotiating a proper deal that protects jobs and the economy. And if she can't do that, she should step to one side because there's too much at risk from a no deal. And if she can't do it herself, let Labour get on with the negotiations, or let's have that general election and let the people decide.
So just to be clear, would you support a deal that Theresa May comes back with if you think it is, the best or at least a reasonable way of protecting jobs? Because looking at your 6 tests, I mean, one of them is to deliver the exact same benefits as we currently have as members of the single market and customs union. I mean, that's impossible, isn't it? No matter who's in the negotiating seat.
Well, those tests are basically the tests of what they set themselves. This is what they promised us. They said, she said, David Davis said, exactly the same benefits. So our tests are based upon what the government promised us. But we've said time and time again, bring back a deal that will protect jobs and the economy. And yes, of course, we'll support it. But the problem that we've got, and we saw it in your interview with Philip Hammond, she's got people in the cabinet now, even the Chancellor by the looks of it, who are willing to risk our economy on the basis of a no deal, because he has fantasies about us being like Singapore off the coast of Europe as a tax haven, threatening our manufacturing base and threatening our economy. I found that interview deeply, deeply worrying.
A little bit earlier on, you were just saying there about the Labour's 6 tests being based on what the government promised. So are you telling me then that Labour is deciding on how to vote on one of the most important issues that our country has faced in decades on the basis of something that David Davis once said?
No, I'm saying what the Prime Minister has said in the Commons, because she repeated exactly what David Davis said, giving those assurances. But what we're saying, and very, very clearly, and Jeremy Corbyn said at a Labour Party conference, we want a deal that would protect jobs and the economy. If the Prime Minister brings that back, we will support it. But you know as well as I do, it's almost impossible for her to get this through either her own cabinet or her own party, and certainly not through Parliament by the looks of it, because the DUP exercises a veto over all matters. What we need now is proper negotiations. And I say again, If if the Conservative Party can't do it because they're in such disarray, step to one side and let the Labour Party come forward, do the negotiations in the interests of the country, because we believe we can secure a deal that will protect jobs and the economy overall. The last thing we need now is these threats from Philip Hammond or others that they're willing to prepare for a no deal.
OK. Now, of course, I'm sure Philip Hammond would say that it's the responsible thing to be preparing for no deal. I'm keen to talk to you about austerity as well. Theresa May promised...
You seem to want a no deal by the looks of it.
Theresa May promised an end to austerity. Philip Hammond said in the interview, we're now at a turning point. So do you believe that by tomorrow austerity is going to be over?
Of course not. Well, there's a test, isn't there? Theresa May has announced austerity is at an end. Let's see in this budget. Let's see, actually, if we are going to get all the money the health service needs. He's announced 20 billion, but we've been told by the experts, the Health Foundation, that that simply isn't enough. That's a standstill budget. And in fact, we now know the health service has got something like £11 billion in the red. So a lot of that money will be taken up by just covering past deficits.
So how
you
much
mentioned
would it cost?
Schools. Head teacher.
How much would it cost to
We've
end austerity
already
then?
said whatever. Well, we've said already, we put our budget forward last year in the general election, £49 billion worth of investment in our public services overall, paid for, yes, by increases in taxes on the top 5% of earners and cutting back on corporation tax giveaways and tax giveaways to the rich. That would be a start, and we would invest in our economy and grow our economy in a way which would afford our public services. What I found absolutely amazing in your interview as well is complacency about schools. There are 18,000 schools out there, at least, that are having budget cuts. We've got teachers and head teachers marching on number 10 because of the cuts that are occurring in their schools at the moment. Head teachers sending out begging letters. I thought the whole interview around the public services as well was completely complacent, cut off from the real world that most people are experiencing out there.
You were just outlining there some of Labour's measures that you have already outlined, so corporation tax, increasing income tax for 5%, but described it as the start, because ending austerity would cost more than that, wouldn't it? So where are you going to find the money from?
Well, we've said that's our first stage budget that we'd introduce when we go into the last general election. When the next general election is announced, we'll publish a new manifesto. It will be fully costed. And yes, we'll invest to grow our economy. And you know, that's the problem with austerity. It was wrong from the beginning. Well, as soon as you introduced austerity in the early, 2010 onwards, you held the economy back. So as a result of that, you delayed the recovery. And that meant wages started, but wages were cut for most people, and they still are. And at the same time, our public services, our social fabric was being undermined. What this is, by the Prime Minister in particular, is an acceptance that actually austerity has failed. And people are not going to put up with it anymore. That's why we need investment in our economy to grow the economy so that we can afford the public services we need on the basis of a fair taxation system.
I just want to nail you down on the figures, because this is important. According to reports this week, you said it would cost around £108 billion to end austerity. Is that right?
We said this is what the cuts have amounted to over the last 10 years. It's the scale. We wanted to point out to the government.
Are you going to reverse
What we're going to do is exactly as yes, we're going to start the process off of making sure we have a fair taxation system, invest in our public services, and you know the best way of reversing austerity is investing in our economy, the thing this government's failed to do. Business investment now stagnating, government investment cut back, and as a result of that, in the first 6 months of this year, we had the lowest growth in our economy since 2011. Last year, the lowest growth in our economy in the G7. If you don't invest, you don't grow the economy, and as a result of that, you can't invest in your public services. We're going to have a fair taxation system, enable us to pay for our public services in that way, enable us to invest in our economy, grow the economy. In that way, everybody will share in that prosperity.